Alright guys, so what makes an interviewer decide to hire you? That's what we're going to be going over today. But first, I want you guys to imagine the scenario real quick. What if you suddenly knew that you could beat out other candidates during the interview process? Well, everyone knows it doesn't matter how good you are at your job. If you suck at interviewing, you're not going to get the job. But what key strategies make your interviewer decide to hire you? That's the question that I asked myself when I was basically screwed and needed a job that paid more because I had a baby on the way. And the answer that I found was pretty simple. Connect with your interviewer, then build value. In that order. You have to connect with them first, then build the value. So, how do you create connection? Well, you ask questions to establish their personalized view in order to find out what they need. Now, what this means is all throughout the interview, obviously at the end of the interview as well, but all throughout the interview, you're going to be asking questions of your interviewer to find out their personalized view. What this means is that regardless of the job description, each hiring manager or person interviewing you is going to have their own idea of what personality traits the person that they hire needs to have, what skill sets they need to have, and they also have their own kind of quirks as a hiring manager or someone interviewing you as well, like people that they tend to gravitate towards. So you're establishing what they need to hear basically in order to know that someone is valuable, and then find out what they need. What do they specifically need out of the person that fills this position? Once you know that, and once you ask these questions, you'll build a sense of connection and bonding with your interviewer. So, how do you build value? Well, the most powerful way is by using your questions at the very end of the interview. After all, your questions at the end are usually the last thing that happens before the interview ends. So it's very important to end on the most powerful note possible, where you've communicated as much value and created as much connection as possible. So, let's jump straight into these questions. The first question you're going to want to ask at the end of the interview is, what's the turnover rate for this department? Now this might not seem like a big deal, but it is. This will allow you to catch warning signs and show that you care where you work. So if they have a turnover rate of 90%, that means 9 out of 10 people are either quitting or being fired in a very short period of time, at least in that department. And that means that you're going to have to go through this entire interview process all over again in a very short period of time, possibly before you're ready. And how this shows that you care where you work is you wouldn't ask this question if you're just going for any job. You would ask this question if you're really concerned about where you're going to be working. So it starts to build value there. So the next question. This is quite possibly the most powerful one. So if you only took one from this, I'd like you to take this one. If we were having this conversation 6 months from now, what would I have needed to do in order for you to know that I've done a good job? This does a couple of things. It forms unconscious associations, shows that you care about your performance, and it implies that you'll do a good job. So breaking this down real quick is by saying, if we were having this conversation 6 months from now, for them to answer this question even without reading the rest of it, they have to imagine that it's 6 months from now and they've already hired you, building this kind of subconscious association that you're already the person that they hired for the position. Then you can kind of take that a little bit further and go with the what would I have needed to do in order for you to know that I've done a good job. So now they're not only picturing that they've hired you and it's 6 months later and you guys are talking, but they have to imagine that you've done a good job and what that looks like in their head, further cementing in those subconscious associations that you will do a good job. And it implies that you'll do a good job because here's the problem. Just about everyone, in some form or another, during their interview, is going to say, you know, it's really important to me that I do a good job, or I really care about my work performance or the quality of my work. Everyone's going to say that. When everyone says that, it means nothing. They'll basically think, well, yeah, you know, everyone's going to say that. I guess we'll have to see. But you're not actually coming out and saying, you know, hey, I really care about doing a good job. You're implying it because you wouldn't be asking this question if you didn't truly care about your performance and really work on doing a good job. One last note on this question is that it also gives you the exact recipe for how to do a good job for that specific manager, what his proof metrics are, so to speak, for him to know that you've done a good job. So next question. If you had to name your favorite thing about working here, what would it be? Now, first of all, people love talking to them about themselves. They, in some form or another, it makes them feel significant that you actually kind of care about their position, right, or their opinion. So this also fosters a feeling of connection because you're allowing yourself to bond in a very work-related way. So they're remembering this good memory about things that they like about this job, and the fact that you're asking them on their personal opinion kind of builds that connection, and that's exactly what this question is designed to do. Now the next question is the exact opposite of that question, which is if you had to name one thing that you would change or the most difficult part of working here, what would that be? And once again, people love talking about themselves. It fosters a feeling of connection again. Now it fosters a feeling of connection again in a different way, is you're still asking them for their opinion, but they're also going to have a chance to kind of admit to you something that they might not normally like to share, but in this context, they'll be more than willing to share usually. So that's a really good one. The trick with this one is not to commiserate with them. If they say, there can be a lot of micromanagement in this position, and sometimes that's difficult to deal with. A bad response to that would be, yeah, I can totally see how that would suck. The reason that's a bad response is because they're going to wonder if you can actually handle the job. So you don't want to kind of commiserate with them. You just want to acknowledge what they said and say, awesome. I know that's not always an easy question, and I'm really glad you answered it honestly. So next question, and this is going to lead up to your closing question, which is, assuming we found each other a good match, when should I expect to hear back from you, and what's the projected start date? Now, if you're going through some sort of staffing company or this information was mentioned in the ad, it's still good to have them say it again, and the reason it's good to have them say it again is because they're thinking about you specifically when you're asking these questions. And it establishes value again because you're saying, assuming we found each other a good match, not assuming you found me a good match. You're leaving yourself in this decision-making process still, and it shows that you really value where you work. And of course, I said that it makes them think about you specifically, and it leads into the closing question, which is, I have a few other companies that I'm meeting with over the next week, but I'd like to hear back from you before making a decision. Just to confirm, I should hear back from you by Wednesday of next week? Whatever that date is, obviously. But this is a soft way of creating something called scarcity. Basically, by saying that you have a few other companies that you're meeting with over the next week, they're going to know that there's a possibility that you might not be available soon. If they don't act to hire you very quickly, you might be off the job market. It also establishes more value using social proof. Basically, if other companies are looking at you and looking to hire you, then you're probably valuable. So that's real important, and just remember that scarcity is a big thing because no one else, at least no one else that I've seen during the interview process, creates scarcity like this in the sense of makes there be an urgency to hire you, whereas most candidates won't create that urgency, so they're not on the forefront of the hiring manager's mind. So that's a really, really important one, is make sure that there's that urgency there so that they think about you first and think about you longer and get you a decision back faster. Even if that decision is no, that's much better than, waiting weeks or whatever and hoping that you got the job. Now, if you did this right, the chances of you getting this job will skyrocket. So this has actually led over half of the members of Interview Domination to get the job offer on the spot or at the next day at the latest for the job offers. So anyway, moving on. So the real purpose of interviews, they need your help. This is why they're interviewing you. They need your help, and they want to hire you. They just want to make sure you're a good overall fit and that you can do the job. Do you have any idea how frustrating it is to interview 10 people and not find the person that you're looking for the position? As a hiring manager, you have to take time out of your day and your responsibilities that you have to get done no matter what to actually interview these people. And it's really frustrating when you go through multiple people and still don't find the person for the position. So, one big thing about interviewing is that interviewing for a new position can be much better than getting a raise at your current position. There's multiple reasons for that, but the biggest one is the numbers. Let's say you make $30,000 a year, and by switching positions, you get a 10% raise, basically. When you go onto the new company, you negotiate it, you just ask for 10% more. Not a big deal. Most employers wouldn't even blink at 10% more, right? That's $3,000 extra dollars a year. Of course, Uncle Sam is gonna have his piece of the pie too, and that's fine. That's a completely different conversation, but that's a really, really easy way to jump up your salary, and you can actually ask for a lot more each time you interview for a position than 10%. And the industry standard for giving someone an annual raise is 3%, which is not much. So you can really jump up your salary by using interviewing.